There is something you have been trying to hold still. Maybe it is a person, the way they see you, what they say about you, whether they stay. Maybe it is a situation, a job that will not move the way you need it to, a relationship that refuses to resolve, a version of the future you keep reaching for and cannot quite close your hand around. Maybe it is just the feeling itself, that low, constant pressure of things not being where you put them. You are not the only one who has lived inside that grip. But here is what almost no one ever teaches you. Most of what you are trying to control was never actually yours to control. And the one thing that has always been yours, fully, completely, in every circumstance, no one has ever told you to protect it. This is a story about a man named Epictetus, a Greek slave who could not choose where he was born, who owned him, or whether his bones would stay whole, and who became one of the most important philosophers in history. Welcome to the Silent Lesson. Epictetus was born around 50 AD in Hierapolis, in what is now Western Turkey. He was born into slavery, not captured as an adult, born into it. His name, Epictetus, is not a proper name in the way we understand names. In Greek, it simply means acquired. He was property before he had words for what property meant. He was sold to Rome as a boy. He eventually became owned by a man named Epictetus, a powerful freedman who served as secretary to the Emperor Nero himself. Epictetus had wealth, status, access to the most powerful men in the empire. He also had a reputation for cruelty of the casual kind, the kind that does not need to announce itself because it has never been challenged. Epictetus worked in Epictetus's household. He watched, he listened. Somewhere in the corridors of that household, in fragments overheard, in texts he was not supposed to read, in conversations that were not meant to include him, he encountered Stoic philosophy, and something in him recognized it immediately, not as a new idea, but as a language for something he already knew. The way you recognize a truth that explains something you have spent years feeling without being able to name. The Stoics taught that the world was divided into two categories: things in our power and things not in our power. The body, reputation, property, other people's opinions. None of these were in our power. What was entirely within our power was internal: our thoughts, our values, our response to whatever happened to us. Epictetus was a slave. He understood this division in a way that most philosophers could only theorize about. He did not have to imagine what it felt like to have external things stripped away. He was living it every hour of every day. And in that living, he found something no one had arranged for him to find, a territory so small it could not be taken. He called it his own. There is a story about Epictetus and Epictetus that has been passed down through the centuries. Whether it is literally true or whether it became true in the retelling does not matter. What it describes is real. Epictetus, in a moment of cruelty that needed no particular reason, began to twist Epictetus's leg. Epictetus did not cry out. He did not beg. He looked at his master with the same steadiness he always carried and said calmly, "If you keep going, you are going to break it." Epictetus kept going. He wanted a reaction. He wanted proof that he held power over something inside this man that could not be philosophized away. That whatever composure Epictetus wore was a performance, a mask, and that underneath it there was the same fear that was everything else contained. The leg broke. Epictetus said, "I told you that you were going to break it. You have broken it." His tone was not angry. It was not proud. It carried no performance of endurance, no theatrical stoicism. It was the tone of a man observing a fact, the way you might note, without particular emotion, that it has started to rain. What Epictetus had wanted was power over Epictetus's inner world. He wanted fear. He wanted humiliation. He wanted the proof that pain could reach the place where Epictetus actually lived, behind the eyes, in the part of a person that no chain technically reaches. And Epictetus denied him that, not through willpower, not through gritted teeth and a performance of control, but because he genuinely did not experience the breaking of his leg as a breaking of himself. The leg was not in his power. His response to the leg, that was entirely his. The story unsettled people for a reason. We understand what it means to take someone's possessions. We understand chains and exile and the loss of a future. These are comprehensible losses. They can be measured, documented, grieved. They fit into a story we already know how to tell. But what Epictetus encountered that day was something different. A man who had drawn a line around a territory so small, his own inner response, that no external force in the world could reach it. Not hunger, not humiliation, not broken bones. The Stoics had a word for this territory, Prohairesis. It refers to the capacity of the rational mind to choose its own relationship to circumstances, not to choose the circumstances, not to pretend that pain was not pain, not to perform serenity while suffering in private, but to choose what meaning to assign to events, what response to give them, whether to hand them the power to define who you are. Epictetus later wrote, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." This is not positive thinking. It is not an instruction to smile through difficulty. It is something more precise, more demanding, and ultimately more useful. The observation that the story you tell yourself about what has happened, what it means, what it says about you, what it requires of you, that it requires of you. Story is yours to write, always, even when everything else has been taken. He knew this not as philosophy. He knew it as the only practical fact that had ever been of use to him. Eventually, Epictetus was freed. The exact circumstances have been lost. He was later exiled from Rome under the Emperor Domitian, along with many philosophers who had become inconvenient to the powerful. He traveled to Nicopolis in northwestern Greece and opened a school. The people who came to study with him were not slaves. They were wealthy Romans. Young men with property and names and futures already arranged by their families. Men who, by every external measurement, had everything Epictetus had never had. And they were struggling in ways he had stopped struggling long before his chains were removed. One young Roman arrived at Nicopolis, having heard of Epictetus's reputation. He had traveled 3 days. He wore a toga of fine linen. He arrived expecting to discuss philosophy in the way Romans of his class discussed philosophy, as an intellectual exercise, a mark of cultivation, something to mention at dinner. He found instead a man with a bad leg and a simple tunic who asked him, before any greeting was exchanged, "What is it that you are afraid of losing?" The young man had not expected that question. He thought about it honestly. His reputation at the courts, his father's approval, the career he was building, a marriage arrangement that was not yet settled. Epictetus nodded slowly, the way a doctor nods when a patient describes symptoms he already recognizes. "And are any of those things in your power to keep?" The young Roman did not answer right away. He had been educated since childhood. He had studied rhetoric and law. No one had ever asked him that particular question before. Epictetus kept returning in his teaching to what he called the fundamental division the only distinction in philosophy that he believed truly mattered in practice. Some things are in our power, he taught, and others are not. In our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not in our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, whatever is not of our own doing. He was not saying that what was outside our power did not matter. A broken leg matters. A lost reputation matters. A relationship ending matters. He was saying something more precise. If you make your peace of mind conditional on things outside your power, you have handed your peace of mind to forces that do not care about you and will not protect it. You have tied your contentment to a current you cannot direct. On the third day of the young Roman's stay in Nicopolis, Epictetus asked him to make 2 lists. The first, everything he was currently worried about: his father's health, his marriage arrangement, the opinion of a senior official at the courts, a legal matter that had not yet resolved, the outcome of a petition he had submitted, the weather on his journey home. The second list, everything on the first list that was actually in his power to determine. The student sat with the second list for a long time. It was shorter than he expected, but, and this surprised him, it was not empty. How he responded to his father's illness was in his power. Whether he acted with integrity in the legal matter was in his power. The effort he brought to his work each day was in his power. The honesty with which he entered the marriage, whatever its arrangement, was in his power. But most of the first list, the approval, the outcome, the official's opinion, the weather, none of it. He had been spending his energy for years trying to grip things that were designed to slip, and because they kept slipping, he had concluded that he was failing. That more effort, more control, more grip was the answer. He had never once considered that the grip itself was the problem. The young Roman returned to his life. He was not transformed dramatically. Epictetus did not promise transformation, only clarity. And the clarity came slowly, the way eyes adjust after moving from darkness into light. He began to notice, in the ordinary hours of his days, the places where his suffering was not caused by what had happened, but by his insistence that it should have happened differently. A colleague received a position he had wanted. He could not control that. He could control whether he spent the following months rehearsing resentment or redirecting his attention to what he could still do. A letter arrived from his father containing criticism he had not requested. He could not control the letter. He could control whether he answered with honesty or with performance. These were not dramatic choices. There was no single moment of awakening. There were only small decisions made daily in the space between event and response, that small pause that most people collapse without noticing. He wrote to Epictetus once, months later. He said, "I thought I came to learn philosophy. I came home having learned something I will use every day for the rest of my life, and it has nothing to do with argument or rhetoric. It has to do with a list." Epictetus, when his students read the letter aloud, simply nodded. "That is the whole thing," he said. "That is all of it." Epictetus died around 135 AD. He owned almost nothing at the time of his death. The ancient writer Lucian noted that an iron lamp from Epictetus's household sold for 3,000 drachmas, because people believed touching what he had used might make them wise. He would have found that deeply ironic. He spent his life insisting that wisdom was not transmitted through objects or reputations or the prestige of the teacher. It was a practice, worked at daily, in the space between what happens to you and what you choose to do with it. The leg that Epictetus broke healed badly. Epictetus walked with a limp for the rest of his life. But in all the accounts of that moment, the twisting, the quiet warning, the breaking, the calm observation, He never described it as an injury to who he was. Because it wasn't. His master had broken a bone. He had never reached the other thing. There is something in your life right now that you have been trying to hold still. Something that keeps moving, that refuses to stay where you put it, that costs you sleep and energy and days you will not get back. Before you reach for it again, make the two lists. The first, everything you are worried about. The second, everything on that list that is actually yours to determine. You may find that what is actually yours is smaller than you thought, and more than enough. Tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you keep trying to control that was never actually in your power? You don't need to explain it. One word is enough. If you know someone who is carrying the weight of things they cannot change, send this to them. Sometimes the right words arrive at exactly the right moment. And if you want to find more of these quiet lessons, stay with the silent lesson.